About a month ago, I made a YouTube post asking whether you guys would like to see a new skill introduced to old school. Over 29,000 people voted in the poll, and 61% voted yes, and 39% voted no. The most common viewpoint in the comments was that instead of a new skill, Jagex needs to focus on reworking dead content and completing the Runescape map, like finishing off the black map region within the desert. OSRS has been out since 2013, and in that time, 3 skills have been polled, and a few of them were very close to passing and being added to the game. The 3 skills were Artisan, Sailing, and Warding. Artisan was actually polled twice, once in July of 2014 and once in August of 2014, and both times it failed, with 58.9% yes the first time, then 56.5% the second, far off the 75% that's needed to pass. Artisan was a skill that would give players tasks to complete, but skilling tasks, not like Slayer with killing monsters. Players would be told to gather a specific resource, like mining 200 tin ore or 100 kebit claws from Hunter. The skill was proposed to bring a range of new features to the game. Fish fillets, which could be added to potions, would give them a special effect, and with prayer potions, it would give a small chance to give an extra 20% prayer point regeneration. There was artisan tools, like equipable knives and spades, as well as pickaxes that had increased chances of finding gems, axes with a better chance of a bird's nest, and fishing rods that had a chance of not using bait. Overall, Artisan was a concept that would get a lot of players out and skilling, but it would also drastically change the skilling and combat metas, and wouldn't exactly bring any new concepts to the game. On the 10th of September in 2015, so 1 year after the Artisan poll, a poll started for a skill called Sailing, and 68% of players voted yes, which means it came very close to being introduced to old school, and was probably the most fitting proposed skill for the game. Before I explain how sailing worked, I have a word from today's video sponsor, Nordvpn. In this day and age, pretty much everyone wants your data. Using a VPN encrypts your online identity, helping you stay anonymous and secure while avoiding tracking from prying eyes. Nordvpn is one of the leading VPN providers in the world, with unlimited bandwidth for over 5,000 high-speed servers in 59 different countries. You can use it to change your Netflix region in a few seconds, and if you're Australian like me, you'll know that the Australian version of Netflix doesn't really have many good shows, but the USA version has heaps, so I'm always using a USA server to get the better Netflix. NordVPN doesn't log any of your data and uses double encryption to further increase your anonymity, which is very important on public connections like at the airport or at a cafe. Along with all of their features, Nord has a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support, so if you aren't happy with something, there's always a way to resolve it. So to get started with Nord, use my link down in the description to get a huge 68% off a 2-year plan, and also get 4 months completely free. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. A year before Sailing was polled, players got their first look at the skill in the 2014 April Fool's event. In the event, players could visit a few of the islands after talking to a captain near Draenor Village. Players would have been able to unlock various shipyards that they can dock their ship at. Then they could use the dock to travel from. There was a range of wooden hulls and upgrades for your ship, like storage chests and figureheads, with very similar qualities to a player-owned house. You could then travel to different islands at different sailing levels, some with skilling areas, some with new bosses, new skilling methods, monsters, a huge range of new content to explore. Many of the proposed rewards and loot from the skill have actually been added to old school already, despite the skill not passing. This included things like Zenite jewelry, augury, rigor, fossil island, and many more. Overall, sailing was probably the most fitting skill, but there's a huge range of reasons why the community didn't want a new skill at all, which I'll explain shortly. The most recent skill that was proposed was warding, and this skill was sort of a mix between crafting and magic for the creation of magical armor. The poll for it started on the 19th of July 2019, and it got 66.1% yeses, fairly close to being introduced, but players felt that it was something far too close to crafting, which didn't really need its own skill. It involved using magical substances on materials and taking them to locations to imbue them together and make magical armor. The skill was proposed to introduce a huge range of new armor to the game, with new set effects. Overall, the idea of creating magic armor was too specific to be a skill, and it also didn't feel very old school. A skill needs to bring something new to the game, and warding felt like a new way of accessing the existing content. So overall, from those three skills, I think that sailing was the best fit for old school. It wouldn't exactly change the landscape of the game too much, but it would bring a brand new concept to the game. Although, there are many reasons why a lot of the player base is still against a new skill at all. A new skill would certainly bring a range of new issues. The primary one is that it differs too far away from the old school feel to have a new skill. The main reason people play old school, or at least start playing the game, is for the nostalgia, and by having a completely new skill that never existed back in the day would certainly make it feel a lot different. Many players would argue that old school already feels like a whole new game, but much of the early game is still the same. There's mostly just new content to explore rather than brand new concepts. Adding a new skill would also dramatically change the high scores. There's now 10 players that have 200 mil in every single skill, and adding a new skill would add a new race to 200 mil, which would change the order of these top 10, since rank 1 will just be the first of these 10 people to reach 200 mil in the new skill, rather than be first to 200 mil all. Along with deterring from the old school feel and affecting the high scores, adding a new skill will also affect the actual game itself. Many of the skilling metas will change. If either sailing or artisan was introduced, the skilling metas would be way different today, with new items, new areas, and new boosts. Any new skill will also dramatically change the prices, especially something like warding, which would make some methods unviable, again changing the skilling landscape. Adding a new skill would also need a huge amount of testing and development, and certainly can't be a rushed update, since it will affect the entire game. This is something that Jagex probably isn't quite ready to do, since they're very focused on other content, and putting their whole team onto a new skill would leave the game stale for quite some time. Most of the old school community would rather that Jagex continued fixing dead content and finishing the story of certain areas, rather than adding a brand new concept. Many of the current skills still have plenty of room for expansion too, like runecrafting is only creating magical ammunition, but what about magical armor? And firemaking is a very pointless skill with a lot of room for growth. So those are all arguments against adding a new skill, but what good could it do for the game? A new skill that's properly thought out and fits old school would be very beneficial to the growth of old school. It would add a new race to level 99 and 200 mil, and many players would return to the game just to see what it's all about. Back when Dungeoneering was released, many players returned and found that they really enjoyed the new skill and really boosted the game's popularity. That was up until the graphics rework and the dreaded evolution of combat. But recently, with the Trailblazer League, we saw a huge boost in the popularity of the game, so maybe a new skill isn't really the best way to achieve that. A new skill would bring so much new content for everyone to explore, content and concepts that we've never seen before. Some players argue that adding a new skill is crucial in the development of the RuneScape story, and is something that the game needs to keep on thriving. But overall, there's a lot more reasons why a new skill would be bad for old school rather than good. Any new skill would certainly affect the old school feel of the game, and there's so much other dead and unfinished content out there that needs to be reworked before potentially adding more dead content. The amount of development that something like this needs is not on the cards for Jagex. They're definitely focusing on other things in 2021, and wouldn't go and change their entire schedule to fit a new skill that might not even pass. So the old school RuneScape snapshot is of the game as it was in August of 2007. Summoning was released in January of 2008, which is only 5 months after that snapshot, which really isn't that long after. The graphics looked exactly the same at the time of release as it is today, and the RuneScape website looked very similar to the old school one. Summoning was pretty 50-50. Many players loved the skill and felt that it really complemented combat, although a lot of players thought it was the start of the end of RuneScape. Summoning was a huge change to the combat landscape, completely shifting bossing with a brand new layer of combat. It also dramatically changed skilling, with a lot of price changes and a lot of familiars that would help with certain skills. Most of the old school community can agree that summoning is something that wouldn't fit in old school, simply because it's far too big of a change and would be far too difficult to implement. Almost 3 years after the old school snapshot, Dungeoneering was introduced in April of 2010, and I think that Dungeoneering would be far more fitting compared to summoning, since it doesn't really change much of the game, and a lot of the powerful rewards, like chaotic weaponry, have already been somewhat introduced, with items like the Garazi Rapier. It really didn't affect skills or combat in a game-changing way. It was its own separate entity for the most part, and was more of like a mini-game. So overall, there's no way of knowing whether old school will have a new skill one day, but if there was a poll for a skill that was very specific and fit the old school style, I think that it would pass, since there's now more new players in the community than veteran players. It's inevitable that a new skill would affect the nostalgia that we get from the game though, and a range of other issues would arise, like the high scores, in-game metas, and changes to prices. So what do you think? Do you think old school should poll a new skill, or do you think it shouldn't? Why or why not? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this different kind of video for my channel. If you enjoyed it and want to see more like it, be sure to leave a like and also subscribe to my channel if you're new around here. Be sure to check out Nordvpn with the link down in the description to get 68% off a 2-year plan and 4 months completely free. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.